Hi folks, how are you doing? A really amazing round we had today, the round number 9 in the Candidates 2014 tournament, with lots of decisive results and a really huge, a round which could be a huge turning point, no turning back point at the tournament, as the standings are really heating up, and a really very interesting games today, with lots of drama going on. Let us see what happened in this cool game between Vichy Anand as white and Vasilin Topalov as black, two former world champions, the big rivals of the 2000s. We had a Sicilian defense. Anand is white, remember, Topalov is black. We reach the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian, where, of course, this is one of the most popular defenses in the world, and well, tons of moves here for white. Anand chooses a cool one, h3. I remember a quote by the legendary Bobby Fischer saying about this move, why can't I waste a move with h3 if black wastes a move like by playing a6? Well, Fischer of course knew neither of these moves were kind of a waste, because he was a great Najdorf player with both colors, and actually this is a cool line against the Najdorf. Now black plays e6 and g4 is played by white, gaining lots of space on the king side, which could be potentially useful, as normally white will castle long and attack on the king side. Now knight fd7, not a common move at all. I mean, here in my database at least, I'm not an expert on the Najdorf at all. d5 is the most popular choice. It seems now that black can play d5 in what seems to be a good condition, he takes advantage to do that. So he takes, knight takes, and well, some options here for white, but it seems that d5 is a relieving point for black, an interesting move to play. Instead, Topalov plays knight fd7. Well, curious move. It's really uncommon. Only 3 games in my database, all of them from 2013, from last year. So one of them is, for instance, Muzychuk versus Ivanchuk. Ivanchuk won that game with black pieces. I think it was in a rapid game. But anyway, Anand plays bishop g2, very natural looking, and already we have a new position for my database. So long life to chess. Chess is not dead yet, as you can see. Only 8 moves have been played. We have a rather new position on the board. Well, some logical developing moves here. Bishop e7, bishop e3, knight c6, and now h4 is played by Anand. Very interesting. He's willing right now to sacrifice the pawn. He could have tried, for instance, I was thinking about, what about queen d2? That's the move I would think about. Very typical move in this line, right? You want to castle long, but there it seems now knight, for instance, will go to e5, and would threat, for instance, to go to c4 and disturb a little white. Then I thought, well, why can't you play f4 just to stop the knight from going to e5? Then we have a very interesting variation. Bishop h4 check. You leaving black this open diagonal on the king side to check. So king f1 must be played. And after, for instance, queen c7, this is a rather unclear position. Everything's still on the board. Just a couple of pawns have been traded, and although white has lots of pawns here controlling center and king side, his knight is looking well in the center. Black has less space, but white won't be able to castle anymore. So, well, an interesting position. Really not clear who is better here, but still to be played everything. And very, very interesting to analyze this one. Well, h4 is a brave move by Anand. Topalov doesn't go for the pawn. He plays knight d e5 to complete development with bishop d7, presumably. Well, what happens if he takes? Then knight takes c6. He takes e6. The queen would take on d6.
So this is what Anand had in mind. If Topalov had taken the pawn, of course this looks better for white, as c6 is very weak. So taking on h4 at the first spot wasn't that great. Topalov goes to e5. Now he plays g5. Anand, he's closing the possibility of black taking on h4 anymore, because for instance if queen e2, with the idea of stopping for instance knight c4, castle long, now black could take on h4 more easily, because there is no queen on d file to take on d6 after the exchanges. The knight is already in e5, the queen defends d6, etc. But white, I think, would have some compensation at least. He could castle long. He would have a rook here on the d file, looking good. f4 may be an idea. So, well, black still has to complete some development. The bishop doesn't look very, very great placed here on h4, so there might be some compensation here for white. It's interesting position to play. But well, Anand didn't want it this way. He played g5, winning even more space on the king side and closing the diagonal for the black bishop. Now bishop d7, knight took on c6. Well, I still like queen e2. It's a possibility. Controlling c4, for instance, if knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, rook c8, long castle, queen a5, a typical Najdorf position with lots of fun ahead, probably could appear. Now, you know, the typical black doesn't castle, b5, etc. Lots of exchange sacrifices on c3, all that stuff. But well, Anand, after bishop d7, he decided to take first on c6. And after after bishop takes, he plays d3 to stop forever this knight c4 threat. And well, f5 here, really seeming a little ugly, but well, he's attacking the central pawn of white. A really interesting looking move here. Of course, if white takes en passant, bishop takes f6, black would have a couple of nice looking bishops on the big diagonals, and well, maybe white is not really worse, but it's comfortable being black here. He has everything he could dream of. But instead, after f5, Anand plays f4, just chasing that knight away. The knight really doesn't have that many reasonable squares to go to. For instance, if he goes to g6, now h5, and he will have to go to f8, so it's not beautiful. If he goes to either other square, I don't know, f7 or d7, it doesn't look really another great place to be with the knight. That knight really looks horrible. So after f4, it's much more logical to go to g4, attacking the bishop. Now queen e2, and you're gonna exchange the knight. And I already like this position for black. I mean, nothing really that special, but black has the bishop pair, fairly solid position. Should be okay. Topalov takes on e4, and doesn't take at first. He could have taken with the bishop, for instance. Now d5, castle. The pawn is pinned, so black could castle. Bishop g2. Well, roughly equal position, I guess. But still, I like the bishop pair here. Instead, after f takes d4, Anand castles long. And Topalov plays d5. Of course, the knight can take here, and the bishop also well could take on e4. Because the pawn is pinned, you cannot take on e4. The queen is hanging there. So bishop a3 check. King b1, and now queen e7. Now black is threatening to take on e4. And of course, the knight goes here to f2, for instance. And well, white has more space, but black has the bishop pair and some active possibilities. Bishop c5, for instance, rook c8. I don't know. He could even have some activity against these weak dark squares on the king side. E6 is a weakness, and white could attack it, but I don't know. I really don't dislike black's position here. I wouldn't mind playing this. It's just a matter of taste, I guess. In fact, bishop c5 was played by Topalov, and queen g3. And here Topalov takes on f2. Well, I don't know. I'm not talking about if it's good or better, but I don't like this move. Why to give up the bishop pair? I mean, you could play, for instance, short castle, and if rook h1, well, some sharp possibilities here. Pawn on e6 is now targeted and it's pinned. For instance, bishop d6, attacking f4. Bishop could take on d5. Bishop takes, rook takes. Remember, black cannot take here. The queen is pinned. So here, after rook takes d5, rook takes f4. Some discard attacks are threatened. Rook could go back. Well, sharp position, really interesting looking one. But well, Topalov decided to take on f2 rather fast. Queen takes, and now he castles. Queen d4, and now these pawns on the king side, quite advanced, may be very useful to attack black king. Now I like more white. e6 is a weakness. Rook f5, rook d e1, attacking e6. Rook f8, black tries his own counterplay against the f4 pawn. Rook h f1 and queen d6, attacking 3 times the pawn, and Anand's response is rook e5, cutting the attack from the queen to f4 and trying to trade a couple of pieces, which Topalov accepts. F takes, and he changes also the other pair of rooks. Queen e7, and well, white now has a pleasant endgame ahead. No big weaknesses, more active pieces, and nothing to lose really. It's very difficult it would be very difficult for white to lose this game. So white is basically playing for two results here. Now he plays a4 steadily and slowly improving his position. Bishop e8. You have to improve always your pieces. The bishop on c6 is doing absolutely nothing, so bishop e8 to go to the king side. King b2, bishop g6. Now bishop h3, and the move which eventually will give Anand a very, very interesting edge. h6 doesn't seem a correct one. It is suggested to play king f7, as strange as it could look. Now queen f2 check, king e8. And well, may look dangerous, but it's really not that clear how to improve white's position, how to advance with white. Instead, h6 is letting white play this way. Takes, queen g4. Now you're attacking the bishop, you're attacking the pawn on e6. Only move to defend both, king f7, but now black falls into, although he's not losing material yet, anything, but he's falling into a very, very passive position, in which basically cannot do almost anything active. h5, bishop e4, and both e6 and even the g6 square are very, very weak. Black is very passive here, and that will give eventually white a winning position. a5, bishop h7, c3, Anand shows that he can play like Carlsen, just slowly improve his position until black has no space at all, has nothing to do. Bishop e4, c4. Well, of course, you don't want to take on c4 because the bishop is hanging. So black plays bishop f5, queen f4. The bishop is pinned, you cannot take. So black takes on c4, but Anand exchanges these pieces, winning already a pawn. Bishop takes f5, e takes f5, queen takes f5 with check. After king e8, he doesn't take the pawn on c4. He wants to keep his pawn structure, so he gives a couple of a little check here on c8, so that he takes back the pawn with a check and with the taking the pawn with the queen. So he's clearly pushing for the victory. He already could see Kramnik and Aronian had a very difficult positions in their game, so this was the day for Anand to push for a victory and try to run up with the tournament lead. King g7, queen d5. There is very little black can do. White is steadily going to improve his pieces, advance his pawns, his king, etc., and eventually you will see black is crushed. King f8, king c3, king e8, b4. Queen c7 check is given here, but king goes d4, already quite centralized. Now queen e7, a little check on g8, king d7, king to d5. Black has no checks, interesting. And the pawn on b4, you don't want to take it, because if queen takes b4, now queen e6 check, king c7, queen d6 check, and the pawn endgame is won for white. If queen takes, pawn takes, now king d7, white plays king e5 and Zugzwang. Black can do anything. Black cannot do anything, and the key point is here that this pawn on a5 is stopping Black's 2 against 1 on the queen side. Very interesting. So Topalov cannot take here the pawn on b4. He goes king c7, but still white is keeping improving his pieces. Now queen g6, attacking maybe a check on b6, attacking the pawn on h6. Queen h4, and well, a couple of possibilities here for white. There may be lots of winning moves, of course, here for white. He could have taken on h6, but this gives Black many chances, too many checks. Queen h1 check, for instance, d4, d1 check, e4, g4 check, and if queen h4, Black could take on h5. Well, still, of course, much better for white, but not that precise maybe. And also giving a check on b6, or maybe not a possibility. But after king b8, he could take on h6. But well, Anand chose on the move with number 50 to give a check on d6. Now king c8 and king c5. Either way, Black cannot stop white pieces from improving. So queen f2 check, queen d4. Of course, any queen exchange is an absolutely resignable position for Black, so it doesn't make any sense about thinking about it. So queen f7, now queen c4, queen g7. Once again, the pawn on h5 is not very appetizable to take, but really doesn't. It seems a lost position anyway. King b6 check, discovered check, and a couple of options here for Black. The worst of those being king b8, because this is leading to checkmate. If king goes to d8, now queen c7 check, king e8, e6, and this is hardly any more playable. And if king goes to d7, e6 check, king e7, king takes b7, a6 will fall, and this is already done. So well, Topalov didn't take the pawn on h5, but really queen g7 doesn't do anything to stop this discovered check. King b6 check, king b8. If king d8, then queen d5 check, king e8, queen e6 check. Couple of choices. If king f8, we have this queen c8 check, and check on the 7th, taking the pawn, absolutely winning. And if king d8, now queen f6 check, exchanging queens, and gone baby gone, lights out, the game is over. So well, at this point, of course, Topalov is pretty much lost. He plays king b8, a couple of moves more. Now queen c5, defending the pawn. Now also threatening queen d6 check, and there's very little Black can do here. Queen f7, but queen d6 check, king c8 and e6, and well, it was enough for Topalov after 57 moves. He resigned, and Anand has now a magnificent position on the standings, 1 point ahead of Aronian, a much better tiebreak as Aronian. Kramnik also lost yesterday, so really a great day for Indian fans today. And he's right now the #1 candidate to win this tournament and face Magnus once again. Wouldn't that be pretty? Let us see what happens. Thanks for watching.